Hello and welcome back to Israel with Aline. Today we are going to visit the Ein Gedi Oasis, one of the most incredible places in all of Israel, which is the only place that survived the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was also the refuge of King David. And we will finish by discussing the connection of Ein Gedi with the fulfillment of biblical prophecies in today's times. So if you are ready, let's get started. We are now in the Judean desert next to the Dead Sea in a part known as the Valley of Siddim. And this place is completely dry. And it's hard to imagine what this place looked like in the times of Abraham. This place was green, full of life. The Bible compares it to the Garden of Eden itself. Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go toward Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible also tells us that Abraham and Lot each had large flocks and many animals. And so there was a competition between them. And so Abraham decides to move away from Lot and comes to him and says, "You can choose the place where you want to go." And from all this region and from all Canaan, Lot chooses precisely this region here because it was the most beautiful, most fertile, with large cities, with great movement. And Lot comes here and lives precisely in a city very close to here called Sodom. But Sodom, Gomorrah, and 3 other cities that are called the cities of the plain, they will sin greatly against God. And because of this, the punishment of these cities will be a destruction and desolation that we can still see in the region to this day. The cities are completely wiped off the map, and amidst so much destruction, so much desolation, in an area that is the Dead Sea region today, with extreme heat, dry, salt, and sulfur that we see here to this day, a small piece remains as the Garden of Eden, an oasis in the midst of all this region. This oasis is called Ein Gedi, and it is it that we are going to know now and try to understand why exactly this place was spared while all this region was desolated. We have now arrived at the entrance to the National Park Ein Gedi, where most of this wonderful oasis is located. And as you can see here, the entrance is paid. It costs 28 shekels per person. And we're going to go in, and I have a special tip for you. Come with me. This place preserves its biblical name to this day, Ein Gedi. Ein means spring or source, and Gedi or Gdi means the kid. And in this case, they are the wild goats that are very numerous here, and we are also going to see several of them today. And now then, folks, welcome to Ein Gedi, the spring of the wild kid. Look how beautiful that every time we get closer to the spring, the place gets greener and greener. It's impressive to see the contrast of this place with what we saw earlier, with the desert that surrounds this place. This is really an oasis, the only oasis in this entire region of the ancient Sodom and Gomorrah. The contrast is really impressive, but now we are going to seek the living water of the desert. Here we see one of the 4 springs of the Ein Gedi Oasis. In total, the 4 springs have 3 million cubic meters of water per year. It's a gigantic amount, especially considering that we are in the middle of an extremely dry desert. But it's not just a gigantic amount of water, it's the purity of the water. This water, folks, it's so clean that it's considered mineral water. And it's bottled and sold in supermarkets in Israel without any kind of treatment. So imagine a spring of pure and clean water in the middle of the desert. It's what we also call living water. It has been this way since biblical times. And that's why when David, who at that time was not yet king, he looks for a place to take refuge, there's no better place than Gedi, which is an isolated place and hard to reach. Is there water and in abundance for David and all his men? But why was David running away? David had defeated Goliath and was becoming very popular among the people of Israel. And Saul is jealous of David and believes that he could be a threat to his reign. And so he decides to kill him. And since Saul had an entire army at his disposal, and David had far fewer men, he decides to flee to En Gedi. We are following in the footsteps of David and his men. And not just us. En Gedi has become a very popular place, especially for families to stroll. Well, you must be hearing the background noise that's happening here. A school of Israeli Arab girls just arrived. And I think it's beautiful to see how this place attracts everyone and unites everyone. We are seeing here Muslims, Christians, and Jews who have just passed by, all united through En Gedi. And they all have a common story here. And now, folks, you and I, we are going to start a great journey and a trail. So now we are really going to delve into En Gedi. Imagine King David arriving at this place with hundreds and hundreds of soldiers. And now we are going to hear the passage and understand what happened in this place. When Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En Gedi." So Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went to seek David and his men. On the slopes of the wild goat rocks, he came to a sheepfold on the way, where there was a cave. Saul went into it to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost part of the cave. Then they said to David, "Today is the day of which the Lord spoke to you. Behold, I deliver your enemy into your hands, and you will do with him as you please." Then David got up and, unnoticed, cut off the corner of Saul's robe. In these mountains there are many, many caves, and in one of them David and his men hide. But when King Saul arrives here, he enters a cave, not knowing that it was in this very cave that David was. And now imagine David's thoughts, seeing his great enemy in front of him in a vulnerable way. And David, he slowly gets very close to King Saul, takes out his sword and cuts, but instead of cutting and killing his enemy, what does he do? He cuts a small piece from the hem of King Saul's robe. King Saul doesn't realize this. He leaves and starts to go away. The first reaction of David's soldiers was, "Why didn't you kill him? You had the perfect opportunity to finish off your enemy." But David spares King Saul's life. Why? Because Saul was anointed by God despite all the mistakes he made in his later years. Saul had been chosen and anointed by God. And David respects that and puts justice in the hands of God. It's a tough climb here today, but the view is well worth it. Look here behind us, we already see the Dead Sea, which we will talk about once again about the connection of the Dead Sea and the biblical prophecies in a little while. But it's impressive that the Dead Sea is so blue today that its color blends with the horizon. But if you look closely, you can see the sky and the Dead Sea side by side. We now take off our shoes to be able to enter these waters. And folks, the water here is cold. Since it comes from the spring, it is quite cold throughout the year. It's amazing to see so much water and such clean water here in the middle of the desert. And to think that we are here next to Sodom and Gomorrah, a dry and destroyed region. And my thought at this moment is, why was this particular place spared? Why did the whole region become desert? And for some reason, God allowed this island of life to remain here until today. And in a practically untouched way. And as you can see, we have a path here really of the waters that we can follow. And guys, I think it's worth it if we're here to really go all the way to the end. All the water from Ein Gedi, it brings life to this region, and an example is right behind us. Now we can see here a chafankela, a rock rabbit. It's one of the many animals that live here in this oasis. Another animal is the wild goat, which we call Eyel, and we often see here among the rocks. And besides that, there are reptiles, birds, many other animals also always circulating. And now we are going to do the last part of our climb to reach the biggest waterfall of all. The second largest waterfall in all of Israel is here in the middle of the desert and is called King David's Waterfall. And walking around here, I wonder one thing, why was this place spared? God destroys the 5 cities that were nearby, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. These cities were completely devastated and no longer exist today. And this contrasts greatly with the Ein Gedi. You can see that the oasis still exists to this day, but not only it. We have archaeological evidence that there were people living here before and after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. In fact, a beautiful synagogue from the Roman era was found, and even to this day, people live here in the Ein Gedi kibbutz. I really haven't been able to figure out why God spared Ein Gedi. This is King David's Waterfall, a 36-meter waterfall running in the middle of a completely dry desert. And our journey for today continues. Now we will start a descent and we will go to the lowest place in the entire world. There are two biblical prophecies connected here to the Ein Gedi zone. The first is in Zechariah 14. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming. On that day it will also happen that living waters will come out of Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea and half of them to the western sea. This will happen in summer and in winter. The prophecy tells us that there will be a great river that will come from Jerusalem, passing through the region of Ein Gedi, and will enter the eastern sea, which is the Dead Sea. And the prophet Ezekiel also talks about this. Then he told me, these waters go out to the eastern region and go down into the desert and enter the sea. And being brought to the Dead Sea, the waters will become healthy. And will it be that every living creature that passes wherever these rivers enter will live? And there will be a great abundance of fish, because these waters will come there and will be healthy. And everything will live wherever this river enters. Also the fishermen will stand by it. From Ein Gedi to Eneglaim there will be a place to spread nets. Its fish, according to their kind, will be like the fish of the great sea, excessively abundant. The prophet Zechariah and Ezekiel say that this region will come back to life, that there will be fruit trees, plants, fish, fishermen, that it will be an abundant place. And to believe in this, seeing what this place looks like today, completely desolate. But the Bible tells us that in the distant past, this region was as green as the Garden of Eden. And the Bible also tells us through the prophets that this region will return to being that way. But why am I telling you all this? About a place that seems completely destroyed? This destruction was not caused by wars or conflicts. This is called Bolanim, in English Bolanes. And they have everything called Bolanim, in English Bolanes. And they have everything to do with the fulfillment of these same prophecies we just heard. The Bolanes are craters that are opening up from the Ein Gedi region, heading north. And they are emerging due to the retreat of the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is drying up and dropping more than a meter in level per year, and these craters have started to open up, which in itself is a shocking phenomenon. When the engineers from Israel built this road, what we call here the Ein Gedi bypass, they designed it in a special way so that it would be resistant to these craters, these sinkholes. But it was of no use. The road completely collapsed. Thank God this happened when the road was closed and no one was injured here. So the opening of these sinkholes has already shocked many people here in Israel. But one more impressive thing started to happen in recent years. Part of these sinkholes began to fill with water, and some of them with fresh water. And this fresh water began to attract vegetation, birds, and even fish. Just as the prophet Ezekiel wrote 2,600 years ago that the fish and the fishermen would start to reappear, this from Ein Gedi to Eneglaim. And we precisely see the first sinkholes here in Ein Gedi, and they continue from this region. And very close to here are these fish inside the sinkholes. And many really believe that this is the beginning of the fulfillment of these two biblical prophecies. We are inside the first sinkhole, There is nothing further south than here. There are almost no sinkholes throughout Jordan as well. This region, this concentration of sinkholes, and all the sinkholes with fresh water and fish are here in the north region, near Ein Gedi. And now that you are seeing this phenomenon with your own eyes, I leave the question, do you think that all this that is happening has or does not have a relation with Ezekiel 47? So, on your next visit to Israel, be sure to visit the Dead Sea and Ein Gedi region to see all this with your own eyes. Thank you to everyone who watched today's video. A big kiss and see you next time.